WNST and the Redskins and seeing the Orioles out on the West. I get misty and old school about a lot of stuff and a lot of people. Very few people I've known in the world longer than this guy. And the Dunbar-Baltimore boys story brings old friends together. If you know my story and the story of Captain Harvey's in Dundalk, this was the guy that used to make me those sandwiches with extra onion down in the beautiful Logan Village Shopping Center many, many times when I was at Dundalk High School. And I've bragged a little bit, but you're going to hear more about my Dundalk High Athletic Hall of Fame entry on October 20th. And we're going to have a Dundalk hootenanny for all the old Owls on October 20th, so stay tuned. But he's no longer in the sub shop business as his family was for a couple of generations. He's in semi-retirement, hiding away somewhere in Dundalk, and ready to talk Baltimore boys and basketball and Dunbar with me. And he's actually seen the ESPN 30 for 30 special and probably watched Bobby Sablehouse throw the football out on the west side as well. We welcome Steve Cerrone back on, one of my lifer buddies. He's crazy. I'm crazy. We're going to be together crazy now. And, man, you get very, very misty about the Dunbar guys because you were in those gyms for virtually every one of those games, Steve.
Well, I saw over. I was with them for over half of them, including road trips, and because from 1980 to 1983, I worked in basketball, running a basketball scouting service. And how lucky can you be? You go into the basketball business, and out pops this magical group of people that all converge together. 5 miles from home. How lucky can you get?
And you've known this story for 35 years, right? I've known this story for 35 years. And look, I met you in, 1981, 82, 83. You're slinging subs. You're scouting basketball. You got pictures of Reggie Williams on the wall, and you knew him well. And those guys would come in sometimes for a sandwich, and sometimes you deliver some sandwiches. And a lot of those guys were hard on their luck kind of guys. And you knew the people of real integrity, like Terry Truax that I knew, and Bob Wade, and you knew all of the back stories of Lefty Driesell and John Thompson and Muggsy and going down to Wake Forest and all of the stuff that happened during that. And Jim Valvano, you came in contact with all those guys. Alonzo Moore, you regaled me with stories throughout the 80s of all of that. But around here, everybody knows a little bit of it, and it's been chronicled in the paper. And look, if you're from Baltimore and you care to know those stories are here for you. But on a national level, for Bobby to bother me 2 years ago, and I think I put him in touch with you, at that time, because he was looking for videotape because no one had videotape, and you were in those gyms. Nobody was holding the video camera back then unless Keith Mills sent his dad over from 13 to shoot 2 minutes of some Lake Clifton game or something to get 10 seconds of the highlights on with Vince Bagley or Jack Dawson. But there was no ESPN. There were no national cameras. 60 Minutes didn't, come in for that stuff. Sports Illustrated rarely came in for that stuff. And that stuff is left to storytellers like yourself to try to tell these stories, right?
Well, the interesting thing was, like I said, being in Baltimore and starting, being in the basketball business for the 3 years before I went into the family business. It was an extraordinary amount of luck. The other factor was that Bob Wade was so exceptional to me. I couldn't repay Bob Wade if I lived 5 lifetimes. Because it was through him that, I became close with Muggsy and with Russ, Reggie Williams, and with the rest. And quite frankly, it opened the doors for me before that season started as well. With people all around the country. I think people knew because of my relationship with the people at Dunbar that they could trust me. So I had great working relationships with coaches from California to St. Johnsbury, Vermont.
Give me some stories as you see it, and first off, you've seen the piece. You've previewed it, as they say. I haven't seen it yet. I'll admit that, and I've got it on the DVD, DVR. I've had some issues with my mom this week and the Orioles and the Ravens and things that didn't allow me to just go watch it when I wanted to, or really go over and sit in Dunbar. I was, watching out on my social media. So many of my Facebook friends are Dunbar related through either Tommy Polly or through Bob Wade or through people I know, or I've been here a long time too, right? And media people like yourself, who this is all I've ever done for 32 years is local sports. So. I feel bad that I wasn't a part of that, but just watching it all and watching the friendships and watching the pictures and watching David Wingate show up. I haven't seen David Wingate in 25 years, and I don't know David Wingate at all. I think I had him on the show once or twice back in the 90s, but, some of the guys from that thing, Muggsy and I sat in a booth and drank beer with Charles Barkley all one night when he was still playing in the league back in 1999. One of the funniest stories that I would have for my, Pirate Looks at 50 book if I were to write about it. Muggsy was an incredible part of that. But I don't have those stories of being over at Dunbar. But Kathy Frazier had them when I was at the News American in 84 and 85 and 86 because that was that era. Perry and Terry Dozier, and, of course, their boy, now one son, one nephew, is famous in his own right. And, we are the next generation now. But I wasn't a part of it. Dude, you were. Give me your story about how you moved into that family there, and because that was a tight thing, and there were not a lot of Caucasians in that gym. There were not a lot of media in that gym. There were a lot of scouts in that gym. There was a lot of fanfare around that team. But I think that this documentary goes way beyond the basketball part and way more to the economics, the drugs, the politics, the race, the culture. From what I understand, the 30 for 30 is way bigger than the basketball side of, hey, these kids all went to the NBA. Because we all know that, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. My first meeting with Bob, he was, basically, what do you want with me? And, he was very defensive. And I told him right off the bat, I said, let me tell you, I'm on your side. I said, I was a fan of this school back when I was in school. I said, believe me, I'm an ally. You'll see that. And we spent some time together that first meeting, and by the end of the first meeting, I think he knew right away that I was. And he just was good to me from that minute on, and better and better and better. And people have one thing, well, maybe they will have an idea of now, because it did come out that he was quite protective and did everything he could to try to shield his players as much as possible from the bad parts of the city and from anything that could go on, that could reach them, that could bring them down.
Well, it's more complicated now, though, right? In that respect of social media, scouts, people on the take, people on the come, pimps on the street trying to front money. I mean, crazy stuff that maybe back then, every kid didn't have a cell phone back then. It didn't have access to anything other than what was in front of them and what was 6 blocks away from them. And in a lot of cases, that alone was treacherous, right? I mean, literally, right?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example of that. A great one I've never told publicly before, but, why not, right?
Sure. Yeah, if not now, when, right?
Yeah.
If it can be told, okay, so.
Oh, yeah, it can. I was at a basketball camp, and there was, the different teams at the basketball camps were all coached by high school coaches from around the country.
Give me an era here. What years were these?
This is 1982.
82, okay.
And
Nike was just like a brand new company then, right? Like nobody had heard of these athletic I mean, it's incredible how much we were using payphones back then. I don't think we had push bumps.
In those days, the top two camps were the 5-star camp run by Howard Garfinkel and the BC camps run by Bill Cronauer. And at one of the sessions of one of these camps, a coach approached me in the morning session, and he said, look, when my game's over, I want to talk to you. I've got a proposition for you. I'm like, okay. And he said, look, I've got a house in Virginia Beach. It's directly on the beach. And you obviously have an exceptional relationship with these kids from Dunbar. And if you can get one of them to transfer to my school, he can live in my beach house, and I'll provide the transportation every day for him back and forth to school, and I'll give you $5,000 cash.
It's a lot of money in 1982.
Now, that's right. So what I did is I'll show you how old it was. I then went to a payphone, and I used my Sprint phone number to access a long-distance line. I mean, by the way, you and I both know that people that are young enough to be my kids would have no idea what I'm talking about now, payphones and access lines for long distance. And I got hold of Bob, and I told him what happened.
I'd like to place a collect call to Bob Wade.
Well, no, I used my Sprint 800 number to access the Sprint system. I'll never forget this. I mean, it's just funny how technologies have changed. And then, I talked to Bob, and I must have sounded fairly upset because he was calming me down. It's like, it's okay, I'm going to take care of it. And they were short one coach for the afternoon sessions.
Wow.
He was gone.
Wow.
Yep. And
that's a hell of a story, man.
Yeah, and I think that speaks volumes for number one, Bob stepping in and how things were, and just the way he was thought of, nationally. That all he had to do was say the word, and that guy was gone. And that's a true story. Now, of course, today, what you're talking about trying to shield the kids. The problem is the high schools hardly even matter anymore. It's these traveling teams, that have taken over. The NCAA is just totally acquiesced to AAU, and that's to me the death knell of the sport.
He is Steve Cerrone. He was a basketball scout in the early 80s and famous through my life at Captain Harvey's. His family owned Captain Harvey's in Dundalk for many, many years. Not the current Captain, or the old the real old Captain Harvey's. But for you with the film itself, I know you got emotional about it. I mean, you were texting me into the night on Tuesday, or I actually began this conversation by saying, hey, Dunbar, I probably should have Steve on to talk about this. I bet Steve has something to say about this. And people were, well, it was a night of storytelling. I mean, all over my Facebook, people had pictures up with Bob Wade and pictures with Wingate and pictures of them as kids. And I thought, you have all these pictures from when you were a kid with all of them because you were around them all the time and used to regale me of stories with them as they were playing in the NBA. And I would sit in your back room eating your delicious cheesesteak subs with onion and some French fries back there with some ketchup. And we would sit and watch the Orioles on the West Coast late into the night or watch Saturday Night Live or whatever it was we were doing in our friendship. And all of those guys were playing in a league at that time. They were all in the NBA. And 30 years later, there's a movie made. This will be the only movie made unless they, reenact and go get actors to do some, Hollywood production. But what did you think of the film as a film, and did Bobby get it right?
Well, I think for the most part, I mean, there were some, what's going to be perfect? Nothing's going to be perfect. But I thought it overall was pretty good. I was, me, I'm fairly emotional, and the toys that you're laughing.
We all are.
So,
come on.
Well, with me. So,
well, if it matters, you get emotional. That's what you do.
So, this
is one of the most fun things you were ever a part of. You admit that, right?
I was okay until I saw Bob the first time in the movie, and as soon as I lost it.
It's a good thing you're not on my timeline. He did the show the other day.
I lost it. And then he looks so much. He really has kept well. It's amazing. As a matter of fact, he even, he had that, something he always used to do was, pull at his jacket, and he even did that in his first few seconds in the piece. I was okay up until then. You have to say one thing. I thought that it was a great thing for Baltimore. I mean, because this really was done with reverence. I mean, look, there are things, would I have done differently if I were doing this? Sure. And I would have definitely had some different people. I felt bad for people like Tim Dawson and Keith James who didn't even get their names mentioned. You know, I mean, these were guys who started every game, but, for the most part, I thought it was great, but it was also great because Muggsy, Russ, and Bob are great, so, how can you're working with a great story right there.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought Tom Konchalski, I was really glad to see Tom. He is still to this day revered in the basketball business. He's a true icon. He's one of these people that maybe if you don't know the inside of the game, you don't realize who, some of these people that are the cogs, behind the scenes. And he was certainly one of them. He's, for 40 plus years now. I mean, the guy's amazing. So I was glad to see him, and he said they're, the deepest team in history. He wouldn't say best, but he did say deepest, and I sort of agree with him. I don't know about best ever, deepest ever. Yeah. Now you have these super teams, and he mentioned one, Oak Hill, 1993. But
that was an all-star team.
That's a different type of school.
Recruited.
I would never compare an Oak Hill Academy to a Dunbar, because they're recruiting from other states, and that's a different story. But as a pure high school team, I think that it's Power Memorial and Dunbar, and there's nobody else. That's it. There's no other discussion, and would have been a hell of a game.
Well, go ahead.
No, pick your Power Memorial team, the one with Lou Alcindor or the one after. I'd pick the one with. He picked the one after. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But this was a super, super special team with amazing people. The crowds, Nestor, at the Dunbar games in 82, 83, it was like a festival. I mean, people just going ballistic, at every game because it was so wild. And forget the scoring. What made it so great, and I've always felt like this in football as well, when a team plays great defense, that's what, everybody talks about, you want to see the offense, you want to see scoring. But when you really develop a relationship with a team, I think there's something special about teams that play crazy type defense. And let me tell you something, they ball hawked the hell out of everybody. They were on people like white on rice, and it was a constant flow of people. Most games they doubled the opposition, and if Bob wanted to and played, like the Big 12 coaches do, he could have won the games tripling the scores on people.
But even then, it was a little bit of a Harlem Globetrotter show. When they got together and played Douglas, it was, are they going to score 100 and hold them under 30, right? It was kind of like that.
This is a team, look, Dunbar and Lake Clifton were Baltimore basketball for all intents and purposes. And, of course, Bob and Woody were good friends. And, he brought Woody with him to College Park. So, obviously they're very good friends. Yeah, you're talking about a game again, playing Lake Clifton and winning, by 40 points. Playing Flint Hill, Stu Vetter's team, played them at Morgan State. It was like 7,500 people at that game. It was an amazing game, and beat Flint Hill by 40. Stu Vetter, if you ask him to this day, he'll tell you. I mean, he'll tell you about that game. And here's a guy that has won national championships, is considered arguably the most intelligent basketball coach sort of the post Morgan Wooten guy nationally. Stu Vetter, here he is in Maryland, is the guy, and he'll tell you that team was so exceptional. We can't even think badly of that game. It was just like a marvel to watch them.
Oh, you're giving me all the glories. The Calvert Hall people out there were all screaming about that being sort of, exited or deleted or not part of the grand story. From Calvert Hall's perspective, they're still talking about that 35 years ago because it was that special when they won, right?
Well, I'm the guy to speak to on that because in a crazy twist of fate in 1982, Basketball Weekly, which was the publication, the national basketball publication that awarded the national championship in those years.
The one that mattered, right.
Yeah, they asked me to give the trophy in 1982. So Calvert Hall, held this big assembly, and I awarded the national championship trophy to Calvert Hall. And when I did, I then got in my car and I drove down the Jones Falls Expressway and landed at Orleans Street. And I went into Bob Wade's office and said, "Hey, guess what I just did?"
Wow. Yeah. And Bob still talks to you.
Yeah, it's true. It was crazy. Look, was Calvert Hall a great team? Yes. And I do agree that they were given short shrift in it. I do believe that they should have been mentioned more. But they won the 82 title in basket. And I told the people at Basketball Weekly and Dave Kreider, who at that time, this was right before USA Today started. It was literally 4 months before USA Today opened for business. So he was still the Basketball Weekly guy. And, I told him, I said, look, I know they beat them last year, but if they got on the court with Dunbar this year, they'd lose by 20 points. He says, nope, Calvert Hall, So I gave the award to Calvert Hall, and then, but just because I gave the award, I guess it's like the Academy Awards, you got to give the award to who it says in the envelope, So that's what I did.
Well, unless you're Steve Harvey, then you could do whatever. That's a little
yeah. So, that was a situation. Now, they'd have beat them by 20, but the team in 82 compared to the team in 83, if the Dunbar 83 team played the Dunbar 82 team, they probably beat them by 20, and that was a team that had Gary Graham and David Wingate on it. That's how good the 83 team was. It was just extraordinary.
That was my sophomore year of high school, by the way. I was eating cheesesteaks in your place every night, literally every weekend. We would be in your place.
The funny thing is, everybody knew they were going to do this, okay? After the 82 season, even losing David and losing Gary Graham, it was really clear there wasn't going to be anybody within earshot of them. They were going to beat these teams like Flint Hill and Camden, New Jersey. They were going to beat these big-time programs, and they were going to beat their brains in. Everybody knew it going in. However, okay, that was like, okay, great. They're going to be a really special team. When I realized, though, that we were talking outer worldly was actually during the summer before the school year even started at one of the 5-star basketball camps. I was with Woody Williams. We were standing under a tree after lunch waiting for the afternoon sessions, and, he was one of the coaches of one of the teams, and each team had 10 players, and, they're all all-stars, Nestor, whether, regardless of where they're coming from, whether it's from Arkansas or New York or wherever, in their region, these are the top players, and they're all at these 5-star camps. And I said to him, because I hadn't seen his team yet, so I said, who's the best player on your team? Now, he had Reggie Lewis on his team, and Reggie Lewis's nickname was Truck. And he said, oh, Truck. I said, yeah, right. Who's the best player on your team? He says, Truck. I said, look, Woody, you're talking to me, you're talking to Baltimore here, who's the best player? It's just between you and me. He says, no, it's Truck. I said, you're telling me you got a team full of all-stars. You've got 9 all-stars on your team. And the best player on your team is a guy that's going to be the 7th man on his team? He says, oh, yeah, come watch. So I watched the game in the afternoon, one of his 2 games in the afternoon. His best player was Reggie Lewis. And I just, was saying to myself certain things I can't say on the radio with you right now, because I was just like, let's just say I said, "Oh my God," a lot and leave it like that. Okay. Because it was like, and I'm saying, "Oh my God," because I know that I kept saying something that did have to do with God. I was saying "holy" in another word about 15 times because it was like, we're sitting on something, this is unbelievable. I was beside myself. I couldn't believe it.
Well, 35 years later, they're making movies about it, man, right?
Yeah, and of course, his story is, the tragedy that probably, in a way, moved the story. I'm not sure if his situation didn't happen, if this movie even gets made. If I had a choice, obviously, I'd rather it not happen and not had the movie. And sadly, I've talked to people across the country and back in the 90s as well, because that I then went back and, with the Charm City Classic with Bill Spotzer. I mean, it was with, people in sports at the time when it happened, because it was in Baltimorean and because Len Bias was from Hyattsville, people, it was almost like they conjoined the stories. And, very, very sad. Very, very sad in more ways than one. And, obviously a personal tragedy for everybody involved. To make a movie, there's always going to be a sad part almost, and,
right.
And obviously that was it. But the fact of the matter is that all of these people, honored his memory. And they still do. He's extremely still well thought of, and I'm very happy about that. And I remember the day the news hit. I was like, no. Yeah.
Well, I remember the morning Len Bias hit too. So I was at the newspaper at that time. So yeah. We all remember those those tragedies. I mean, and they mark our lives. Steve, man, I'm going to let you roll. You got anything else you want to add? Feel free to tag it, man, because I know you've got a lot of memories, and I know the Baltimore boys meant a lot to you as well.
Yeah, that'll always be my favorite team in any sport that doesn't wear Carolina blue.
I knew you were going to say that.
I do want to say this publicly, and they can vouch for it, and is that Kenny Smith is the only person in 3 years that I ever mentioned going to North Carolina to, and that was at the night that Russ won the National Player of the Year award at the East-West All-Star Game in Atlanta in the locker room after the game, when he had already narrowed his choices down to Virginia and North Carolina. So I played it as straight as possible for 3 years. And proud of that, and just I'm real proud of them, and I'm glad that a lot of people got enjoyment out of it last night, and I think that's going to be the other thing is with ESPN. They're going to rerun this thing 50 times.
Oh, you can have another. Yeah, I taped it. Everybody will have an opportunity. It'll be sitting on YouTube somewhere, sitting on the web as well, and it'll come back. But the premiere night's a big deal, and it was a big night on Tuesday night. So, Steve, man, love you, appreciate you, and I missed your steak subs. I'm not going to lie, but hey, I'll always have the memories.
Well, just to give you a geographical bit of information that I know you'll appreciate, Friday afternoon I have an appointment on Poydras Street, which is about 6 blocks down the road from the Superdome.
Yeah, we marched up Poydras, so yeah, I'm very aware of that.
Yes.
That was where the cops moved everything when we had 10,000 people behind us.
Yep.
Steve, man,
course, one last thing, though, the funny thing is a bit of trivia, is that Baltimore was the last team that played a sporting event before Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, I was at that sporting event. It was so cold in that dome we left, and the next morning it was like, soup. We were very, very, very fortunate to evacuate New Orleans during the storm. We really were. Steve, man, appreciate you, love you. Take care of yourself, right? And we'll connect again. They'll be dribbling the basketball in no time down at College Park, man.
All my best to the 2 females in your life, Nestor. I love you and your family.
And don't forget my cat, too. That's 3.
Sold.
Steve Cerrone, my dear friend and former Captain Harvey's proprietor and longtime basketball scout, high school and college basketball scout back in the 1980s, telling some Baltimore boys stories. Congratulations to Bobby Sablast. We had Marquise Daisy on, as well as Bob Wade. I'll track down Muggsy at some point and get him on. I'd love to talk to David Wingate, too. I don't know David Wingate, but I have friends that do. So it was great, and it's been a great week to talk about Dunbar Pride, Poet Pride, and what the film meant to a lot of folks. And obviously, it's been all over my social media. So cool stuff, more stories. I'll keep some more stories coming your way. Nasty at WNST. WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Morning newspaper reaches your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And last but never least, any breaking news happens first on our WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.